In 1725, Arnold Paula fell from a wagon and died. Within weeks of his death, his village experienced brutal attacks, leaving 16 dead. Victims were found drained of blood, with no obvious wounds. The murder epidemic only ended when villagers drove a stake through Paula's dead body and roasted it over a fire. Paula's story is just one of many real-world vampire tales. But are vampires real?
Welcome to our show. This is Zain. A vampire is a being from folklore who subsists by feeding on the life essence, generally in the form of blood, of a living being. Recently, we have seen a surge of vampirism within the pop culture. But the question arises, are vampires real? To discuss the history of vampires and if they exist, we have with us today Vernor. He is the author of the Book of the Dead, Spirit Talkers, and also Vampire Evolution, and many other books we can find on Amazon. Welcome to our show, Vernor. This is Zain Khan. It's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is the oldest folklore ever told about vampires? Where could we root back vampirism?
Well, honestly, the very oldest known fiction to man was in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And they make a reference of Ishtar talking about opening up the gates of hell and the dead will walk the earth. And they talk about, devouring of the living. So, it could be either way that it's zombies or vampires, because a lot of cultures, especially the Romanian, where they talk about the Strigoi, could be considered witches, vampires, zombies. They all kind of lumped everything dark and creepy all together as one. So, I would say the ancient Sumerian Babylon, the oldest, what they call the bedrock of modern civilization in the Mesopotamian area, is the oldest folklore.
As a researcher, Vernor, which cultures mention the existence of vampire-like creatures?
I would say that every culture known to man has their own vampire-like being. The Philippines have, in Thailand, they talk about the Aswang, I think it's called. We have creatures in ancient China where they were the hopping vampires, where they actually took the toes of the dead and tied them together because they thought if they came back from the grave to attack their relatives, that it would be harder for them to pursue people, kind of like the school kid prank of tying one's shoelaces together. As far as I've been able to find, there isn't pretty much any culture that doesn't have tales of the dead coming back to prey upon the living. I think it's a universal fear of mankind that once we bury somebody that we're not safe still.
Do you think there's a possibility for the existence of real vampires?
Not in my professional opinion, not from a folklore to reality version. A lot of people fantasize about that, and obviously it's deeply ingrained in us in a society. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of books and films from Bram Stoker's Dracula and prior to popular television shows here like True Blood. And, obviously this is a subject that's never going to die out. But, yeah, as far as someone who truly believes themselves to be a folklore version of the vampire, there hasn't been anything like that.
Last question, E.R. Vernor. Have you met anybody who claims to be a real vampire?
Oh, in my research in the last, I'd say 8 years on this particular topic alone, I've encountered probably 100 people from New York, to Atlanta, Georgia, and the French Quarter of New Orleans that are part of the living vampire community. They're all over the world. They're in Europe. They're in South Africa, Canada. Yeah, they're very, very interesting, energetic, and unique people. They're very artistic. They're very creative. A lot of them are musicians and authors. Um, they dress the part. From dental quality fangs that they actually have several people all over the world that are called fangsmiths that are dental technicians that make theatrical grade fangs for these people. And there's a wide variety from the older Gothic look to the Victorian style to a little bit more futuristic sort of clothing style that these people adopt. And a lot of them think that there's a either energy or health related aspect to this, where it's not just an aesthetic, a lifestyle of partying and going to clubs and things. They actually partake in what they call donors, where they use medical scalpels, and a lot of these people have medical training so that they're not reckless about it, that they actually imbibe very small quantities of blood from their donors because they say that they are deficient in energy or something that's in the blood, where they claim that that's part of their need. So it's quite fascinating to get to know these people. And most of modern society, of course, looks upon them as crazy or too infatuated by Hollywood.
Thank you so much, E.R. Vernor, for being in our show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate being on.
This was E.R. Vernor, a best-selling author of many books on the topic of vampires. We were discussing the history of vampires and if vampires really exist. Until the next episode, this is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.